We are living in some serious times. If there's ever a chance to test your mettle, this is it. A lot of people, we watch movies, Rambo, Predator, Conan, all these movies growing up that I used to watch. We watch them and we think, yeah, if I was in that situation, I would do the same thing. I'd be just like him. But now we are actually in a situation where it's going the wrong way. Things are going things are going bad, folks. I want to swear, but I'm trying not to, but things are going bad. And this is a chance where you could step up. You could do some things and you really get to test your mettle. You get to see what type of person you are right now. Because a lot of people are going one way. A lot of people are standing up and a lot of people are fighting against them. It's a very tough time. And all I want to do is I want to be real. And I want to say, let's all keep it real. Be real. Let's keep it real. We are in the middle of a war right now. It's an information war, though. It's not kinetic. There's no tanks. There's no guns. There's no boots on the ground. This is informational. This is psychological. So a lot of people don't even know we're in it because a lot of people are under the spell, under the propaganda, falling to the censorship. It's there. It's happening. Whether you know it or not. I think most of you listening, you're on the same page as me. We know what's going on. For the past 20 months, watching this, my attitude, my position has kind of been, okay, it's an informational war. Let's try to get information out there. Let's try to share ideas. Let's get conversations going. Let's talk about concepts to get things kind of moving in people's brains so that we are aware of things. We know what to consider, which can help us navigate these distorted signals out there, which are really controlling a lot of people. Like I said, it's a spell. A lot of people are entranced. It doesn't matter what we show people. It doesn't matter what information some people see. They're just going to evade it. They're going to ignore it. And they're just going to stick to what the TV is telling them. And this is very scary. So I'm going to keep talking about a couple concepts, and hopefully these concepts help us kind of just hold some things up here which help us shift perspective, help people look at things through another lens. That's all I want to do here. I'm going to talk about apathy, myopathy, blind conformity to thought-limiting paradigms. And I want to talk about politeness, tolerance, indiscriminate agreeableness, and of course, the big one is cowardice. And these are all things that when you put them all together, it gets very scary. So we really have to be conscious of these. Everyone knows of the First They Came poem by Robert Niemöller, I believe his name was. And I want to read that for a second because I really want to talk about apathy and myopathy. Apathy, we think of like just not showing emotion, not showing interest, indifference, right? That's apathy, just kind of a person being aloof. Myopathy, when we say myopathy, it's not necessarily like we expect people to be prophetic, to be able to see 50 steps ahead what is going on. You don't need to have eagle-eye vision to not be myopic. Myopic is more like you can't see what's just a little bit ahead in front of you. You are only short-sighted. And for some reason, today, so many people are extremely myopic. Myopathy it's just rampant everywhere. And we have to be aware of this because we really need to think about if we let one little step happen, what's the next step? What's the next step? Where are things headed? Right? There's a trajectory. There's a particular trajectory that we are on. And we really have to think, well, what are the possible next consequences? Robert Niemöller said something very simple, and it kind of talked about cowardice, but to me, I look at it and I think more of apathy and myopathy. So I'm going to read it out quickly, and it talks about the incremental purging of citizens in a society. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. We're seeing this right now in our society. They are attacking a certain segment, and what happens? What happens when that segment kind of goes away? They take things incrementally, right? They attack these people's jobs. And then, oh, well, I don't work in the hospital. It's not a big deal. Then the police officer, oh, I'm not a police officer. Oh, they spared the RCMP, so they don't have to worry. Oh, the firefighters, right? Now this job, that job, different jobs are going, and they take them all one at a time, and people don't speak up and fight. Businesses are going to start closing. What happens when an abundant amount of people don't have jobs? This slow, incremental purging, it keeps happening and happening, and we don't do anything. Oh, it doesn't affect me. Think of people who buy fake papers, for example. We're in a show me your papers society, and people, they buy these papers, and then they can still participate. But you're still supporting businesses, right? You're still supporting businesses that are segregationists. You're still supporting these companies. You're still supporting the movement. You think you're pulling a fast one, but what you're really doing is you're still being compliant. You're being extremely compliant, and you're not seeing the long term, because what you're doing is that you're allowing this to keep happening. That is myopic in the sense, well, what happens when boosters come around? Are your fake papers still going to work? Is it going to work forever? Because all the people who you should have been helping fight before, all the businesses that you should have been boycotting, speaking out against, all of those things, all of those companies are still going to have your support when they you should have been defiant against them. So what happens? All that happens is all the people who had the guts to stand up, you didn't support them, even though you thought the same thing as them, you didn't support them. And then when they're exhausted or, they're struggling, and then when it comes for you, you're like, oh man, what happened? How did it get this far? It's because you waited too long. The sooner you rip off the Band-Aid, the better. People need to realize that. It's weird how when we get in these conversations, you always have that one person who gets uncomfortable and anyhow, and they change a topic. Anyway, that's nice, but anyway, and they try to talk about something else. That is a person who is too afraid to look at what is coming down the line. Right? They're too uncomfortable. It makes them so uncomfortable that they don't want to face it. They would rather just kind of put the blinders on and keep going forward. First they came. Who did they come for? When are they coming for you? It's a big question. Now let's think of something else. Okay? Because I don't need to talk about apathy for too long, because obviously if you don't care, you don't care. What's coming at you is going to come at you. But let's talk about the Salem witch trials for a second. Blind conformity to a paradigm. Whoever said that witches actually exist? Think about that. We would burn people at the stake for being witches. We'd throw people in the water and drown them. Oh, if they live after being pushed under the water for 10 minutes, then they're a witch. And if they die, well, they weren't a witch, but they're dead. You're killing people. So the Salem witch trials. We have people in Salem who are accusing people of being witches. We don't even have have you ever isolated a witch? Do witches actually exist? What are your tests? Do you have a reliable test to determine whether a person is a witch? You know, one of the tests that they would do is they would tie a woman. It's usually a woman. 80% of them were women. 80% of the accused were women. They would tie them up to a chair. Okay. They would tie a rope to the chair and they would take them out to the water and they would throw them in the river. If they sunk, they weren't a witch. And if they floated, they were a witch. Majority of people would kind of bob and weave out of the water because people don't just sink, and plus they're on a chair. And then it would kind of be up to the crowd to determine whether they were a witch or whether, they were a normal human being. That was their test. And then you'd have some people who are admitting to being witches, because if they admit to being a witch, then they aren't executed and they can kind of be fixed in society. They can be cured, right? They just have to repent. So some people would say, oh, yes, I am a witch and these people are witches, so spare my life, and then take them, right? And that's what happened in Salem. A lot of people were executed, and then the people whose lives were spared, it's because they repented. You ever hear that story of the teacher? I don't even know if this is true or if it's just like a story, but there's a teacher and she's talking about the Salem witch trials. So she takes her students and she tells them all, okay, for the next hour, you all have to figure out how to form the largest group that does not have a single witch in it. So she goes around, she whispers in all of their ears, and she tells them whether they're a citizen or a witch. And after an hour goes by, she asks them, okay, are you all sure? Are you ready to say who has the biggest group, to see who has the biggest group? And anyone who has a witch in their group, your entire group will fail on this project. And everyone says, okay, they're sure they have no witches. And there's a ton of small groups. So she stands in front of the class and she asks, could all of the witches please raise their hand? No one raises their hand. The kids are like, Miss, that was a trick. You tricked all of us. There's no witches. She simply said, do you think there were any witches in Salem? They were on the premise that someone was a witch. They didn't question it. That is the paradigm that they were working with. They didn't even question the paradigm. Like I said, have we even proven that witches exist? Did anyone ask that in Salem? But they were executing women and some men for being witches. They're tests. How do we know that these tests are reliable? Their act of measurement for figuring out who was a witch, like there were 7 main tests, you should look them up. They're all ridiculous. Blind conformity to a paradigm. And people's lives are taken for this. In our society now, do we have blind conformity to a certain paradigm? Are people's rights being taken away because of this? Everyone's heard of Naomi Schulman's Nice People. That's another one. And this one's really interesting. Nice people. So let's read this. Nice people made the best Nazis. My mom grew up next to them. They got along, refused to make waves, looked the other way when things got ugly, and focused on happier things than politics. They were lovely people who turned their heads as their neighbors were dragged away. You know who weren't nice people? Resistors. How many nice people do you know? People who are afraid to make waves. Politeness, tolerance, things that Canadians live by. We're not strong and free because we aren't strong. We aren't assertive. That's why we're not free. But politeness. Afraid to make things uncomfortable. You ever watch that 70s show when Eric's mom, whenever Red starts arguing, he starts, being extremely assertive or angry, she just smiles and laughs, just tries to change the subject. Anyway. That's Canadians wanting to change the subject. But let's talk about tolerance, because we pride ourselves on tolerance. Are you aware of the paradox of tolerance? The paradox of tolerance is that no matter what, so long as intolerance exists, you are going to be intolerant. Because if you tolerate intolerance, you are supporting intolerance. Or you cannot tolerate intolerance. But Canadians are very polite and afraid to make waves. So which one do you think we are? You're afraid to make waves and intolerance is happening. What type of person are you going to be? Gut check. Who are you? I'll tell you what, most Canadians are going to be polite to intolerance. You know what that is? That's passive. You have two types of intolerance I'm talking about. One is passive, which is letting intolerance happen. And the other one, being intolerant against intolerance, is active. One is obedient. You are obedient if you are passively intolerant. If someone is yelling at me and accusing me of something and taking away my rights, that is intolerant. And if you are doing nothing, that is passive intolerance. All you have to do is nothing. You just have to stand there and watch. You know that something wrong is happening, but you're being passive and you're not stepping in. So you're supporting the intolerance that is happening to me. And you are being obedient to the normalized behaviors. Whereas a person who is actively intolerant is choosing when they are intolerant. And being actively intolerant against intolerance, asserting yourself, asserting your values, asserting your morals, would you not say that's the better choice to make? Because in that position, at least you are acting on your own volition. You are behaving according to your values, according to your morals, according to what you think is right and what you think is wrong. You're standing up against what is wrong. One has integrity, the other one does not. Are you obedient? Or are you defiant against what is wrong, what is unjust? That's a big question. That's a big question that has to be answered right now. Because some things are going on in the world that are extremely unjust in your country, especially in Canada, Australia. What type of person are you? Are you going to turn your head and walk away? Are you too myopic to think what's coming down the line? Are you tolerating these things? The destinies of people are determined by their character, not by their government. I'm going to say that again. The destinies of peoples are determined by their character and not by their government. That is a quote from Gustave Le Bon. He wrote a book called The Crowd, a study of the popular mind. It's not the laws that are made by the governments that are going to dictate where we're going. It's whether or not we are passively intolerant and obedient, which is we are tolerant of the intolerance against us. We are obedient to that, like slaves. Or you are actively intolerant, asserting yourselves, being defiant to laws, mandates, anything that goes against what you believe to be right, to be just, to be for individualism, to be for humanity, human rights. Which one are you? Which one do you support? Etienne de la Boétie had a great concept called voluntary servitude. And what he was outlining is that we are not slaves per se. We are not enslaved by authorities. We enslave ourselves. You think of united noncompliance. United noncompliance and voluntary servitude are very similar concepts. United noncompliance, everyone's getting together and saying no. No. Get together and just say no. Just stop. Voluntary servitude is taking that same concept, except we are understanding that the arm of the tyrant, if you think of the tyrants as a body, if you think of who is infringing on our rights, who is hurting us, if you think of that as a body, the tyrant is simply the head, the arms, the legs, the leg that controls the boot that is stomping us, the arm that controls the hands that are shackling us and beating us. Those are made up of us. Who are the police officers? Who are the military? Who are the firefighters? These are all us, individuals within society. Voluntary servitude is about understanding that these peoples are the ones who control everything. All we have to do is not hold this tyrant, these disgusting infringements. We just don't have to hold this on a pedestal. Just stop. Just walk away. Don't do it. We look at united noncompliance, and that kind of sets two heads going at each other. Voluntary servitude is understanding that we don't need to beat this other knuckle because that other knuckle is us. We don't need to go head to head, fist to fist. We just need to get it to join us. We need to acknowledge that it's all on the same side. It's the gentle way. Cowardice. There's a story of a teacher's during a video in class. The teacher in middle school tells all of the students to be very quiet and focused because this is a very serious matter. They're watching Schindler's List and they have to take notes. There's one kid in the class, Sammy Radcliffe. He's kind of like the class clown, and she always kind of picks on him. Mrs. Baker always kind of picks on him and doesn't like it when he acts up. But sometimes she's harder on him than other kids. Like other kids get away with things that she doesn't let him get away with. But anyway, they're watching this video and they're about 10 minutes in. Everyone's quiet. Everyone's taking notes. And the teacher just starts yelling. She stops the video and she starts yelling at Sammy Radcliffe. She says, "I told you to take notes. I told you guys to focus and be quiet and take notes. This is very serious. This is Schindler's List. This is not funny. Okay, this is a very horrific thing that happened in our history. And you guys are joking around." And Sammy Radcliffe immediately, he's like, "Miss, I was taking notes. I was being very good. I didn't say a thing. Like, look, here's my notes." And she just says, "Don't talk back to me. I'm very disappointed in you." And she's reaming him out. And Patty McDonald, who's sitting next to Sammy, she's getting upset. She doesn't like the way the teacher is talking to Sammy because she was sitting next to him for that entire 10 minutes. She knows he didn't say anything. And she watched him take notes. She's looking at the notes on his paper. And she's flustered. She's upset. And she stands up and she says, "Miss, I was sitting next to him. He didn't say anything. He's been taking notes." And she interrupts her. She says, "Patty, sit down unless you want to go to the principal's office with him." Sammy loses it. He's like, "Miss, I'm being good. Stop picking on me. You are picking on me. I am being good right now. I'm taking notes. I'm doing what you said. This isn't right." And she said, "Sammy, that's enough. I've had it up to here. Go to the principal's office." And she looked around the classroom and she could tell some of the students were uncomfortable. So she said, "Does anyone else want to say anything? Does anyone else have anything else to say? You think I'm being unfair?" No one said anything. "Sammy, go to the principal's office." So Sammy starts crying. He's upset. He's like, he was just reamed out in front of the whole class and he doesn't know what to do. He's walking out of the class. As soon as he closes the door, the teacher looks up at all of them and she says, "Do you see how easy that was? Do you see? Do you see how easy that was? You all bowed to authority." Sammy didn't do anything. Sammy was being very good. He was doing everything he was told. I was watching him. The notes are right there on the desk. Patty was right. She spoke up, but I told her to be quiet and I put her in her place right away. Do you see how easy that was? This is what happened in Germany. Think about that. Is this happening anywhere else in the world is the question. People want to speak up, but they're afraid to speak up. They're scared. They don't feel like they have a voice. They don't know what to do. But the thing is, if people don't speak up, nothing happens. Sammy still went to the principal's office. One person spoke up. What do you think would happen if everyone spoke up and they just told her to shut up? Right? These are the type of things that we have to think about. Because we're not living in a classroom right now. We're living in the real world. Real things can happen. What has happened in history? This is my litmus test for whether or not I consider you a true friend, whether or not I respect you, is if I were getting bullied by 10 people, would you step in? Would you have my back? Let's say 10 people are yelling at me because I'm not wearing a mask and they're crowding around me, they're getting in my face, and I'm just standing there and you know it's wrong. Do you come join me? Do you stand up with me? Or do you turn your eyes, look the other way, and keep walking? What kind of person are you? Because you know what? Maybe it is just a mask right now. Myopathy. Maybe it is just a mask. But maybe tomorrow it's going to be they're not letting me in the store to buy groceries because I don't have certain papers. And I'm trying to get food so I can feed my family. Are you going to stand next to me? You're going to turn your eyes, look the other way. What kind of person are you? First they came. Because what happens next? Oh, they want to start taking people's children away because people don't want their kids to get jabbed? What type of person are you? Are you going to look out your window of your house as people, there's people barging in people's doors and taking them away? Imagine, you call yourself my friend. Imagine this. Imagine contact tracing says that someone who was infected and didn't show any symptoms came near me, came within 6 meters of me, or 2 meters of me, 6 feet. They came within 2 meters of me. And now I have to go to a camp. I have to isolate myself because I never had the jab. So they want to force me against my will out of my home. What type of person are you? Are you going to speak up? You didn't speak up when it was verbal. What happens when it starts getting physical? Do you think all of a sudden you're going to get the guts then? Check yourself. Gut check. Look within yourself. Look in the mirror. What type of person do you think you are? If you're not going to speak up when it's easy, I doubt you're going to speak up when it gets tough.